Welcome to the Love Oracle, where ancient wisdom opens the door to the source of love in you. Hi, and welcome to the Love Oracle. I'm Angela, and today we're talking about the art of relationship. The art of relationship is the art of becoming the other. And it's an area of self-relationships to others that I've been exploring since I was very young, actually. I was always obsessed with that division between self and other because I probably didn't do it very well. I wasn't really good at separating from my mum. I would feel her feelings, as most children do. You always pick up what's going on around you as a kid, but I would feel them intensely, and then I couldn't get out of them, or I couldn't identify my own, or I would feel guilty if I had resentment to her, or I would have a feeling like I didn't want to feel what she was feeling. So I kind of became obsessed in later life as to how I operated like that, when there literally was no division between myself and others. When I, in my adult relationships or even friendships, took on other people's feelings and felt guilty if perhaps they were unhappy and I wasn't, or I felt like I somehow should take away their suffering if they were not feeling great. And, some of us do that to varying degrees. We do that because we want to help people. Some of us do that because we want people to like us, so we're nice to them. You might be a people pleaser. We do that to varying degrees for survival, just so we can help other people and they'll help us. That's the nature of you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. That's what monkeys do, right? In basic monkey behavior, they do a lot of nurturing and preening because you want your hair to be cleaned from all the nettles or other bits of stuff that you've picked up. So you do it for another monkey and then they do it back for you. But, monkeys display all sorts of other behaviors that they can't explain by survival alone. We are not just animals that are bonded by trying to get through life. We're bonded because humans are an animal related to monkeys, or I believe they are, but we've got consciousness that wants more than that. That consciousness is a topic we're not hearing a lot of public discussion about. But what I'm seeing in the public now, with the awareness about what's happened with the death of George Floyd, filmed on camera and shared globally, is that that's not humanity. That's not what we want to be. A lot of discussion about justice and this beginning of the discussion of what humanity is. And that's not apparently what humanity is, the killing of a man in public on camera. But, a lot of deaths are happening off camera. So apparently there is an aspect of humanity that is about murder. But there's a huge uproar that we are not that sort of social creature. We don't want to be that, apparently. Apparently there's a huge movement towards that. However, subsequently, because of that, we've seen a lot of violence on the street and more death. So the irony is that in protesting the death of a man, other deaths are occurring, including my teacher Helen shared with me this week a death of a cop in New Zealand who was just doing his job, pulled over someone in their vehicle and literally was just doing a routine check on the person, but the person lost control and shot the police officer who wasn't even touching the person. And that person now has committed a murder, but he literally has lost control of his rational mind. And that police officer went to work that day just doing his routine job. So we're seeing violence coming out in all sorts of areas. The difference is it's on camera, and the global mass media is focusing on it because there's been a lot of violence for a long time and variously documented. But why are we now at this point of civilization, if you call it that, or consciousness, where we're really sort of asking questions? Is that humanity? That's not humanity. What is humanity then? I ask you. If we look to our monkey relatives, they do show us some clues as to what humanity is capable of through nurturance. I saw a beautiful clip actually the other day on Facebook of someone who raised a chimpanzee from birth and found them in the wild 5 years later. And that now grown ape, I think it was, I'm getting my monkey species mixed up, that ape actually recognized that man and went up to him, held him tight, brought him to show his wife and children, and was holding and hugging him and followed him back down the river. So he got into the human got back into a boat and went down the river on that boat, and the grown ape followed him. It's so beautiful. I'll see if I can put the link to that video in the podcast, because it just showed me that in this time we're seeing a lot of the dark side of humanity in the mass media. But if you look anywhere, it doesn't take long, you'll find these great experiences of what humanity is capable of, and also other species. There is a spotlight on our consciousness in this time because a lot of negative emotions are being spewed forth, and we're being given an opportunity to see who we are and what we're going to do about those negative emotions, how we're going to manage them. So the interesting question that my teacher Helen brought to us this week was actually, can you legislate people to deal with these negative dark sides of humanity? Can you enforce law? And I'm a big proponent of changing legislation to make better laws for institutionalized racism. I'm a really big advocate for it. I think you can do a lot for police brutality, and I'm a big fan of laws that favour different ways of handling people physically. And a lot of my friends who work with people who experience trauma have to deal with this all the time. When someone's raised to be violent, they're going to react in violence. It's just the nature of how humans are. So you have to learn how to deal with trauma, people who are raised in trauma. And I'm not saying that the cop that killed George Floyd was raised in trauma, but he definitely comes from a culture that's institutionalized violence and encourages it, or a system that institutionalized violence. And to me, that's traumatic because it's taking away the humanity from that person. It's actually ignoring the humanity of that person. It's telling that cop to ignore his humanity, and it's encouraging that. So I'm all for laws that are encouraging new ways and procedures of handling the body and of handling violence and of handling traumatic situations, or situations where someone is inebriated. There's all sorts of amazing trainings out there for the police. I've met police officers that do trainings like that in Australia. I've met a French person, a French trainer, and he's come to Australia to help work in the days when, before the COVID virus, we used to have raves. This particular French guy was training the security guards to work with a lot of the inebriated young people at these events, because they didn't use guns. In Australia, we don't use guns at the events. but they use conversation. And he told me in a really great conversation at one of these events, there was a few less drugs at that event, though. It was a spiritual event called Uplift. But he explained to me really clearly how he would train police officers to work with people in those environments. And there's plenty of people out there that do these trainings. They're just not really implemented all over the USA, and it's not really something well funded. But you can say the same for a lot of other departments in a lot of countries. And you could say the same for our community services in Australia. We have a lot of people that don't know how to deal with people who've experienced trauma. And as a consequence, you get people who don't know how to deal with someone who does react emotionally because they've experienced trauma, and they may actually act out in violence because they've experienced trauma. But there's a new word that's been shared around the internet, and it's called de-escalating techniques. And that's a huge training that's already been out there for several decades. So what comes to my mind as I'm thinking about our response to over excessive emotions and the dark side of humans, we've got the training strategies. We don't have the laws necessarily to enforce those training strategies to help people de-escalate over reactionary responses to emotions. We don't certainly have the laws to stop certain strangleholds on people and the way you touch their body. But is it laws alone or trainings that can move this forward? Because I've met people who do these trainings. There's not enough of them out there in the world for all of the forces that deal with people. And it's not just the police force, but there's also mental health services. A lot of people in mental health do not know how to deal with someone who's inebriated or on drugs. And if you've ever dealt with some people on drugs, some people are calm when they're on drugs or passive. Some people are violent. So if you've ever dealt with anyone on what we call ICE in Australia, as some psychologists have to deal with, they can't deal with them without a police or someone more physically competent there present to hold down that person. So you do need somebody who can hold down someone who's inebriated sometimes, depending on the drug. Someone who's drunk is usually a lot better than some of the drugs that are out there. But I know a lot of people who work in the mental health services in Australia, and to say that you can de-escalate every situation is not possible. So I'm going to suggest and offer today a different perspective on the situation, because I am an advocate for laws, and I am an advocate for de-escalation strategies, and I am an advocate for training people to learn these strategies to help use our intelligence as a human creature instead of physical strongholds and guns to control people. I think there's a lot to be said about the conversation now about brutality and how do we deal with mental health? How do we deal with people who are disadvantaged, who may be not just financially disadvantaged, but to be honest, we have a lot of people who are psychologically damaged in the world at the moment, and they need help. And not only are they psychologically damaged in the terms of mental health issues, but we have a lot of people under stress because of the virus. A lot of people who are living with the unknown, who are unemployed, who don't know what their future is. Or even if they have a sense of what that future is, there's so much change that they're just struggling to get through the next bit of their life, which could be the week or could be the month or the next year. It's all a bit different. A lot of us are challenged. And the way it's looking, things are not going to slow down or go back to normal. They're going to be different. People are going to be more emotional. And we're going to have to deal with people's differences and conflict of opinions. And because of that, emotions will be elevated. How do you actually learn how to deal with people's emotions is going to be the next really important piece of our evolution of humanity, because we can see from the media that escalated emotions don't really do much good at all. In fact, they can just end up in more death. And then they can also lead to movements that can put people into situations of danger, whether it's getting the virus, whether it's actually not getting their needs met. They can be put into a certain situation or demonstration or a rally, and are they really getting their lives changed? Or is that rally just stirring up more emotion? Or is a demonstration stirring up emotion? And I think there's a lot to be said about coming together as a group in emotion, but what do you want to achieve as a group? And so for what I would like to achieve as a group for humanity is to start to learn what is the benefit of our emotion, what's the emotion teaching us. I started doing podcasts on Anchor with my friend Patty 3 years ago. Well, 3 years later, I finally realised how easy it was to use Anchor to create a podcast. So I started my own, The Love Oracle. And I've just found out that you can use Anchor on your phone too. But for a computer person, Anchor is really user-friendly for me. It's simply the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free. There are editing tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or phone, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify and many platforms. Within Anchor, you can easily share your podcast to all the social media, and you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So why not download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM. And this is something I explored when I was looking at that relationship with the other as a child, because I would pick up my mother's emotion, I would become the emotion. And then I lost my sense of little Angela. I'd become whatever my mother was having anxiety or sadness or anger or rage about. She was good at raging. And I used to like that because it helped me tap into some primal energy that I didn't understand because I was a kid. But I liked it. I enjoyed seeing that rage, even though it terrified me. There was something it triggered in me about these deep emotions. And because she's Sicilian, she could get away with it. I think growing up with a Sicilian family, I was always terrified by their anger, but also like really excited how they could do it. And maybe other cultures, they don't give that permission to do, but like Sicilian families that scream, because not all Sicilian families scream, but the ones who do, they give full permission to do it. And there's something liberating about that, but it terrified me at the same time. So you can imagine I'm not really good at screaming. When I do it, I sort of collapse after I do it, and I don't do it often. But it taught me that emotion can actually really bridge two people. I learned by disappearing into my mum's emotion that I could actually really understand her experience. It's certainly not healthy to stay in that experience because my mum wasn't happy. But when mum was happy, guess what happened? I could experience that too. That's a double bind with our parents, right? Like it's so good to disappear into your parents when you love them because you get that sense of being bonded in a way that you can't really get until you get into a really good adult love relationship where you really feel bonded with someone. But that love you have with your parents or mum in particular, and for some people it might be dad, that bond and that love where you just really share that joy. It's also married by that negative side of their emotions too. You completely experience that negative emotion with them too. And as a kid, you literally disappear into it. So it's so consuming. It's incredible. I love it. I think it's amazing, that relationship and that ability to disappear into someone's emotion. But it's completely dangerous to disappear into that emotion too, because you actually lose that sense of self. And then sometimes what happens as a kid is that you realize you've taken on your parents' emotion and it's actually not you at all, but you've become that emotion. So you can be like 20, 30, 40, 50 years old and you suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm still living my mum's emotion. What am I doing at 50 years old living my mum's emotion? But this is really the most important work to do when you're learning how to not live in emotion. Some of the most valuable work you can do is to realize when you're older that you're still carrying some emotion from your mum or dad or from your family or ancestors or your siblings, and realize that's not me. That's not me. I'm carrying someone else's emotion. It's very, very important work. And the work I wanted to share today in particular was a strategy to start learning how to use that deep bond we have with those who are close to us, and then to start doing it with those that we're close to before we start doing it with perhaps people we don't truly know, like people on the internet. It's very hard to build bridges of empathy with people you don't know if you're angry, or if you hate them, or if you judge them, or if you don't like them. It's very difficult. It's also hard to do it with your family or people you know or people you care for if you've got judgments about them too. So my work, all the relationship work I've done, and I've done it before I even started doing work on relationships, was to understand the other, to experience the other. I did it in dance class. I'd do it when I was dancing with someone, and some of the dance I did was contact. And in contact, what we used to do before the virus, in the old days, in contact dance, where we used to touch people, we used to actually maybe hold a part of that person's body. It could be your hand on their hip or on their cranium or on their heart chakra or on their back. And I used to do that in Qigong as well. We do some gentle contact in Qigong, and it's extremely powerful when you have your hand on the back of someone's heart chakra and you're just feeling them. You're not doing anything. You're just putting your hand there to send your chi into that person's body, and you're not even sending your chi. You're just allowing your chi to experience that person's heart chakra. And you're not sending any intent except to be supportive. And when you do that, what happened in those dance classes and in the Qigong classes where I shared and experienced people's energy, I didn't have any intent except to be nice and support and just experience the person. And sometimes I didn't even care about experiencing the person. I was just putting my hand there to see what happened. But naturally, I experienced the person, because you guess what? Our bodies are wired to nurture. I discovered that over and over again on the dance floor when I did contact dance, healing work, chi work. And it's incredible. The power of my hand on someone's body astounds me to this day, 30 years later after doing it, since I was in my early 20s. I'm not that old. So 28 years later, I'm still shocked by when I put my hand on someone's body, what happens, because I have the intent to support and to allow energy to flow through to help that person in whatever ways that's needed for that person in the highest good. But I don't do much. I just put my hand there and then magic happens. So going back to the dance class and contact, what happened was we would have an intent to use contact as a way to experience movement or to experience what that contact point was between two parts of the body. Contact is a dance form that originated from basically the contact of two parts of two different people's body. It could be any parts of that body. But what happened is other forms came from contact, and before contact, healing has been an ancient form of touch. So in contact classes, I used to experience healing, and it just happened because I'm naturally wired that way. But all of us are, and I discovered it with people who weren't healers, people who were cynical about healing, people who were inhibited with their bodies, people who were very scientifically oriented or academic, men, women, children, old, people who had different body types and different abilities to move their bodies or not move their bodies, or had parts of their bodies missing, all sorts of types of bodies, people who could move and couldn't move. We're wired to experience each other through touch and through, I would describe it as a natural extension of our heart, the hands, to explore our universe and to explore what is possible to give and receive through the hands, which are directly connected to the heart chakra. So after years of this happening to me, I started to question myself. Why did I even want to experience the other person? Why? Why bother, right? If I'm just able to have a temporary experience in the dance floor or in the dance class or the healing experience of feeling connection, then I could leave that moment, go on with my life, and never really think about it again. But what happened was, as a consequence of experience it through many, many different dance classes, what I started to understand was that my heart was seeking connection naturally as well. I wasn't just accidentally falling into these dance classes or healing experiences. My heart was seeking it. I'm wired to experience other people. I'm desiring to experience others through my heart. And that's an important thing to explore in these times. What is your desire to experience others? It may be very different for you than me. But I'm offering you a strategy today in this podcast to start asking that question as you go about. You could be on the computer. You could be in your bedroom by yourself. You could be on the street or in a public situation. What is your experience? What do you desire to experience of the other? What do you want to experience of others? Your heart will show you. Your head will come up with some ideas too, and they're interesting, but your heart's got something it's looking for too, I can guarantee you. And if we go back to the topic that I started with, the art of relationship is the art of becoming the other. I want to end the podcast with a simple exercise that was given to me by my teacher, Tajasaji. And it was so beautiful because it took me back into all of those moments I had in the dance class or the healing experiences. And it's very simple, and you can try it and see if it works something for you. But in order to experience the other, to change the way you relate to others, and to experience the art of relationship, because it's truly a dance and it's truly an art, is to start by firstly synchronizing your breathing with the other person. And you can even do this across the internet. You don't need to be in the same space. Or you can do that by just imagining the person in front of you and synchronize your breathing with them. Sometimes just doing that first step of synchronizing your breathing and allowing yourself to connect to your breathing will start to allow you to connect to your own heart or your own sense of self, and will automatically start to balance anything that's not in balance, because you're coming back to your own rhythm, your own breath. Now, by experiencing the other person's breath, what you're doing is starting to experiencing how that breath can connect you to anything and anyone just by using that breath. It's how parents do it with their own children. They start to naturally synchronize their breathing. So you can do that at any time with anyone. Now, the second step is to hold the intent to truly or really experience the other person. And I've done this when I was really emotional. So in that moment, I probably wasn't able to truly experience the other person. But what happened was, because I really, really, really wanted to experience the other person, my emotions started to normalize or to de-escalate naturally. And I've even noticed when I've been really emotional, it happened this weekend. I was really emotional and I just said, hang on, what is that person thinking? I wasn't even interested in their feelings. I just noticed I wasn't understanding the person. So I held my breath in that moment and I went, Ange, you're not understanding that person. What is that person thinking? And then I naturally just started breathing with that person's rhythm, and I stopped my emotion from getting out of whack. And that person's paused, stopped speaking, because they were thinking. And I noticed they were thinking, and I was curious. And then they started to speak, and the whole energy shifted. My emotion was gone, and I actually started to become completely engaged with what they were saying. It was incredible. It was a moment, I really won't forget that moment, but it was because I've done this practice a lot, and I deeply, deeply want to experience the other person. So the more you practice holding this intent to experience the other person, whether it's a loved one or even someone you're in conflict with that you might not like, the more you actually practice holding the intent to experience them, things can shift. I've seen this work with people who've had incredible conflict in their relationships. So that's really important, the intent to experience the person. That's step 2. Step 3 is to connect to what you know about the other person. What do you know about them? And when you think about what you know about the other person, what happens naturally is that your mind will bring up a story. We know each other through stories. We don't really know each other. We don't understand each other deeply. We don't know each other's soul, but we know a lot of their stories. So naturally, because you've set the intent in step 2 to really experience the person, the third step, when you ask or consider what do you know about this person, a story will be thrown up by your consciousness. And because you've set the intent to experience them, the story will begin to show you the feeling underneath that story. And there's the juice. Because I can guarantee you that you know a lot of stories about people, but we live on the surface of those stories. And it's only when you begin to experience the feeling underneath that story that you really begin to connect to the person. And our consciousness is really powerful. So once you've set that intent to truly experience the other, and you ask, what do you know about the person? It will immediately show you a story about the person. And then you can start to feel what's underneath that story. Because the story is not important, it's the feeling. And the fourth and final step may not resonate with everyone if you don't have a connection to the divine, but it's been extremely powerful for me. I simply ask to connect to my divine to help me really experience the other person. If you don't have a divine, which could be your higher self, what I do with people who don't have a divine, and I do work with people who don't, they're atheists or they don't really have a divine, I get them to connect to the greatest love possible. And that greatest love possible will be specific to you. It could be your better nature. It could be the highest good for all concerned. It'll be whatever it means for you. But I do this step, I connect to my divine, because what I'm doing in that step is basically saying, whatever love is out there, I'm ready and willing to take help from it. And I don't care what its nature is. I'm just really ready to receive help to get through this. I did this as a kid. I used to be in situations emotionally where I was overwhelmed by my mum's emotions. And I used to pray naturally. I'd be like, I don't know what to do here, but God help me get through this because I don't know what I'm doing. And over time, because I did this a lot, thanks, Mum, I did it when she passed as well anyway with other situations. What happened, because I'd constantly ask for help inside my own head, I didn't ask for it verbally out loud, I'd just be internally going, God, I don't know what I'm doing. God, help me. I don't know what I'm doing. Help me get through this. What would happen was that something different was shown to me. Another option was provided. People would relax. People would change their behavior. They'd start helping me. I just got these miracles around me all the time because internally I'd be dying and thinking, God, help me. And help would come. And you could say that I'm lucky or I've got a good star following me, and maybe I do, but I've done this enough to know that when I really, really just say, look, I'll take help from any source, wherever it's coming from, that opportunities or shifts in emotions have come. And in particular, my emotions. I've shifted. I've opened. And because I've softened or I've just sort of let go of trying to be right in a situation or make things right, my heart's relaxed and the other person naturally relaxes because we're wired to connect. Humans are wired to be able to nurture and support each other in a way that's done more through experiencing each other than telling each other what to do. So I'll review those 4 steps. The first is to synchronize your breathing with the other. If they're not there physically, imagine them and imagine that you're synchronizing your breathing with them. Hold the intent to experience the other person. That's step 2. Hold the intent to experience the other person. Step 3, connect to what you know about the other person and see what comes, what stories come, and just start feeling what's underneath that story. And step 4 is to ask for help to really experience that other person. Ask for help in whatever way makes sense to you, just in your head or to some other external source. And these 4 steps are certainly not going to be making laws that will enforce new behaviours in humans. But what they'll do is they'll give us a foundation to start experiencing each other so that when we come to conversations to make real change in our relationships, it's coming from a heartfelt place where we really start to listen to each other, not attack. And if we can start doing this at a personal relationship level, then we can do it at a community relationship level. And that will follow through to our power structures or the structures that enforce control. If we can't do it at a personal and a community level, we won't really be able to make a difference in our power structures, because it'll be just those power structures enforcing us to be better humans. And we'll still be racist, and we'll still be full of hate, and we'll still be resentful, and we'll still be guilty about not being able to take on the suffering of others. That's not going to change anything. It's when we start to really change our heartfelt way of relating to each other that we go beyond our guilt or differences or shame into making humans react humanely or respond humanely. Like we're seeing within the protests and other situations, the people are responding humanely, and it is making a difference. If we want that to be more on our planet, we've got a lot more work to do, and we'll have a lot more time to start developing this gift. I know I've spent a large part of my life developing that in my personal life. So just from my life, I can see it's going to take a long time for humanity to develop empathy. Decades, years, centuries. We haven't perfected it yet. But if we're going to make change, where do we start? And it's really starting the community to see how can we to work on the inner machinations of guilt or emotions or shame or fear or hate that stop us from being able to have conversations where we make positive change, that keep us in conversations of blame because we feel guilty or less, or we feel like we have to make someone wrong. That is my sharing for this podcast. I look forward to hearing any questions, thoughts, angles you would like me to cover, and I hope you can experience the other in a way that teaches you about yourself and how you can love.